Hello, everyone. Today we have a really good, really interesting topic to speak about the logistical bottleneck, production versus availability. Today I want to talk about something that I think is becoming increasingly important in the coffee market, the difference between production and the real availability. We have the two major Arabica oranges facing logistical problems at the same time. Colombia after the rave cake, and Brazil with port congestion. So the question is no longer only how much coffee is being produced. The question is how much coffee can actually reach the buyer. Redefining supply. When we talk about supply, we normally look at crop numbers, but I think we need to redefine what supply actually means. You can have a very good harvest, but if you can't move that coffee efficiently, part of that supply isn't really available to the market. So today, I would look at supply as harvested coffee minus logistical friction. Having coffee available at Orange doesn't mean having coffee available to the international buyer. And I think the market is increasingly pricing the availability, not just production. So, Colombia's shock point. Colombia is a very clear example of this. After the 7.4 magnitude earthquake, the biggest concern isn't crop damage. The farms are largely there. The immediate problem is infrastructure. The road connecting Cali to Buenaventura, Colombia's main Pacific port, has been significantly disrupted. And even though alternative ports are available, there are transportation and truck limitations. So the cost exists, but moving it becomes much more difficult. And even after the worlds reopen, it can take weeks for the logistical flow to completely normalize. What we are seeing here is that we are not talking about a production crisis in Colombia, but a crisis of access to coffee. And Brazil's paradox. We have Brazil, but for a completely different reason. Brazil's new crop is arriving. Normally, that should mean more coffee, more availability, and potentially some price pressure. But we are facing our own bottlenecks. Port congestion, container shortage, vessel chains, and additional storage and detention costs are making export more complicated. But there is another important factor. Brazilian producers are currently in a stronger financial position. Many of them don't need to sell right away. So they are being more selective about when and at what price they will sell their coffee. So even as the new crop comes in, not all of that coffee is available to the market. And that's the paradox. Brazil has a new crop come in, but that doesn't necessarily translate into immediate availability for international buyers. So today, two of the world's largest Arabica oranges are facing supply constraints. Colombia, because of access and logistics, and Brazil, because of logistics and slower producer selling. And this creates another interesting fact: orange substitution. Colombia is extremely important for washed Arabica, while Brazil has a very different profile, especially natural coffee. So, of course, Brazilian coffee cannot directly replace every Colombia coffee, but buyers still need to cover their needs. For blends and large programs, there is some flexibility to adjust formulations, and this could create additional demand for Brazilian fine cup coffees and consistent special lots. So, a Colombia logistical problem can indirectly create new demand for certain Brazil qualities because it could lead buyers to adjust. Diverging market mechanics. And here's where prices become really interesting. We have two forces moving opposite directions. Global concerns about Arabica availability can support the New York Sea market. At the same time, Brazil is harvesting, and the increasing physical supply can put downwards pressure on Brazilian differentials. So, Brazilian differentials can become cheaper while New York becomes more expensive. And that's important because the final FOB price is a combination of both. So, even if Brazilian differentials weaken, the final FOB price may not fall as much as buyers expect. That's why simply waiting for the Brazilian harvest expecting much cheaper coffee can be a risk strategy. Keep it in mind. Differentials can fall without the final FOB price falling. The forward watch list. So, what should we watch from here? For me, there are four things. First, Colombia. How quickly logistics and access to Buenaventura normalize. Second, Brazil. Not only how much we are producing, but how quickly the new crop actually moves into the international market. Third, Brazilian differentials. Will they weaken enough to compensate for a stronger New York market? And finally, weather. Because if you add a weather problem to a market that is already dealing with logistical uncertainty, volatility can increase very quickly. Okay, so my takeaway is actually very simple. Don't look at only how much coffee the world produces. Look at how much coffee is actually available, movable, and deliverable. Brazil's new crop should increase supply, but logistics, global Arabica availability, and a stronger New York market could keep FOB price firmer than many buyers expect. So for buyers, I think this is a market where procurement needs to be planned carefully. Waiting only because Brazil is harvesting doesn't necessarily guarantee cheaper coffee. In today's market, availability may be just as important as production. Thank you.